In the small town of Headsville, at the foot of high hills, lived Thomas Woods, a kind but lazy man. He avoided responsibilities, preferring to wander the forest with his loyal dog, Breeze. The people of Headsville knew Thomas as a dreamer, a man more interested in the whispers of the wind through the trees than in the demands of daily life. His wife, Mary, constantly scolded him for his idleness, lamenting his reluctance to take care of their home or farm. One autumn day, after a particularly heated argument, Thomas decided to escape for a while. He set off into the mountains, seeking solace in the wilderness. As he climbed higher than he ever had before, the familiar paths gave way to unfamiliar terrain. Eventually, he came across an ancient-looking trail winding through the dense forest. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. He followed the path until he stumbled upon an elderly man carrying a large wooden barrel. The man did not speak, but gestured for Thomas to help him carry the heavy load. Though confused, Thomas obliged, sensing something strange but intriguing about the encounter. They reached a hidden clearing, encircled by towering cliffs. A group of solemn men, dressed in old-fashioned attire, stood around a set of wooden skittles, engaged in a slow, methodical game. Their expressions were blank, as if they were lost in another time. Though Thomas found the scene peculiar, curiosity got the better of him. The old man handed him a flagon filled with a rich, amber liquid. At first he hesitated, but the inviting aroma and his growing thirst led him to take a sip. The drink warmed him from within, making him drowsy. His thoughts became hazy, and soon he drifted into unconsciousness. When Thomas awoke, he found himself lying on a grassy knoll beneath a clear blue sky. At first he assumed he had merely dozed off for a short while. However, as he stood and took in his surroundings, an unsettling feeling crept over him. His clothes were ragged, his rifle rusted, and his once-trimmed beard had grown long and unkempt. The familiar forest felt different, as if time itself had reshaped it in his absence. Feeling a growing sense of unease, Thomas hurried back toward the village. Yet as he neared Headsville, confusion set in. The houses looked different. Some had disappeared entirely while new ones stood in their place. The roads were better paved, and unfamiliar faces populated the town square. People turned to stare at him, murmuring among themselves. He recognized no one, and no one recognized him. Desperate for answers, Thomas made his way to his home, only to find it in ruins. Vines crept over the crumbling walls, and the roof had long since collapsed. Panic gripped him as he called out for his wife and children, but no answer came. Just then, a middle-aged woman approached him with wide eyes. "Sir, who are you?" she asked hesitantly. "Thomas Woods," he replied, his voice thick with confusion. The woman gasped, stepping back. "That's impossible. Thomas Woods disappeared 20 years ago. My mother told me stories about him." Thomas reeled in shock. 20 years? How could that be? He had only closed his eyes for what felt like minutes. His mind raced, grasping for any reasonable explanation. His wife was gone, his children grown, and the village had moved on without him. As word spread, a crowd gathered, whispering and pointing. Some believed he had suffered from amnesia or had been lost in the wilderness, his mind fractured by years of isolation. They recalled old legends of men who wandered too far and drank from enchanted goblets, only to awaken decades later, unchanged by time. Despite his initial resistance, Thomas gradually adjusted to this new reality. His daughter took him in, though he felt more like a stranger than a father. The world had moved on, leaving him behind. Though many doubted his tale, he found solace among the town's older folk, who nodded knowingly at his story. They had heard similar tales before, whispers of ancient beings who lingered in the mountains, forever caught in the cycle of time. Over the years, Thomas became a figure of legend. He spent his days sitting outside the village inn, recounting his unbelievable story to anyone who would listen. Children listened with wide eyes, while skeptics dismissed him as a madman. Yet even the most doubtful villagers couldn't explain the state of his beard, his tattered clothes, or the rusted remains of his once prized rifle. As time passed, Thomas found a quiet acceptance. He never ventured back into the mountains, fearing what he might find, or what might find him. Yet on stormy nights, when thunder rumbled through the hills like distant rolling skittles, the villagers exchanged glances and whispered among themselves. "They're still up there," they would murmur. playing their eternal game, and maybe, just maybe, waiting for another traveler to join them.